Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, Zbigniew Brzezinski, an old friend, once told me, Julius, never address more than 3 points. So I'm going to share with you some experiences and thoughts about the following 3 points. Number 1, university students played a major role in the revolution, in particular on the road to the outbreak of the revolution. Number 2, university students had an extraordinary prestige among the population. Number 3, there was an extraordinary solidarity among Hungarians during the revolution. Well, let's see the first one, the role of the students. Since 1848 in this country, the tradition has been for the students to take a stand on national issues. Since the death of Stalin in March 1953, students became less intimidated than other segments of the society for obvious reasons and began to voice views also in politics. After the 20th Party Congress in February 1956, I remember in Marxism-Leninism class, Comrade Sass, who was the section chief, came in and he said, comrades, now in the spring term, the course material will change. We were doing the history of the Soviet Communist Bolshevik Party. He said, now there will be some studies and reevaluations. We will bring forward the 5th year material, which was dialectic, materialistic philosophy, Marxist philosophy. And I remembered some of the students by that time, because of the very successful social engineering, mind you, not Western style, but with the bayonets, more than 2/3 of the Hungarian students came from peasant and workers' families, the first generation ever go to college. And I remember these people walking around in leather coats, very self-confidently, running from meetings to meetings. And I remember how they were shocked when suddenly they were told, well, the history of this party now will have to be basically rewritten. So the fermenting in the country went on during the summer of '56, and as people mentioned, the Petőfi Circle was a very important forum. We have to recognize that the fermenting and the communist reforms from within were the agents of this revolution. Without those, there would have been no revolution in Hungary. And the students also participated in these meetings, but more on an individual basis. The change really happened when in September all students came back to universities. And they had their critical mass in dormitories, at the campuses, at the university, and they began to address issues of the day. On the 6th of October, there was the burial of László Rajk, who was a prominent communist, not a Muscovite. He was in Hungary throughout, and he was murdered by his comrades in 1949. There were demonstrations afterwards. Some students marched on the streets. But of course, the party hawks who were delivering the obituaries, they said, never again. Little did they know that this never was going to last only 2 months. Then on the 16th of October in Szeged, the students got together and for the first time articulated certain demands, including the withdrawal of the Soviet troops from Hungary, including the allowance for several parties to take part in elections. But this event did not have a nationwide echo. It was not broadcast. A lot of people, me as a student in Budapest, I didn't know about the formation, the re-establishment of MEFES, which was a democratic student organization first set up in 1945 and then dissolved by the communists by 1947-48. So the next critical step was, under this pressure, the Communist Youth Organization needed to do something. So what did they do? They organized general student meetings at all Hungarian universities. So at ours also, at the Technical University, on the 22nd of October in the afternoon. This meeting went from early afternoon until midnight. And at that meeting, some 2,000 people were present in the aula, in the main hall of the university. And three very important things happened, which one by one, I think, led to the revolution. One was that freely anybody could ask questions freely from the floor, which was never the case in these student organizations. All was prearranged and run by a script. And this was demanded because two students came from Szeged who wanted to share with us their experience, their establishment of MEFES. The second very important event at that meeting was, well into the meeting, a student I well knew, he was in the same dormitory on Bartók Béla út. He said, please tell me why are still Soviet troops in Hungary? This poor man was stuttering. But when he finished his question, silence, people began to look left and right. What will my neighbor think or do? And then all of a sudden, 2,000 people began to chant at the highest decibel, Ruskik Haza. This you have not heard publicly in this country since 1945. This was the first time at that general meeting, which was receiving far more publicity than any other meeting. Now, the third very significant event at that meeting was the adoption of the 14 points. The 14 points did not talk about student and college issues, discount on the train, and how is the food in the dormitory, in the cafeteria, and all these other things. It was all 14 points were national issues of the highest order, beginning with the withdrawal of the Soviet troops, free elections, Imre Nagy should lead the government, and people should be investigated, those who were running the party and the country. It was a series of very, very serious political questions, which turned into the demand of the students. And I have to say that those 14 points actually almost instantaneously turned into the demands of the country, turned into the demands of the nation. Now, the next day, the 23rd of October, precisely because of the request for broadcasting those 14 points, the first shooting took place at the radio because the security detachments, instead of allowing the broadcasting, took their guns and killed a young student, a girl. Now, on the 27th of October, once the fighting broke out, 2-3 days into the revolution, so to speak, the students from the ELTE, from the Pest University, came to our dormitory at the Technical University dormitory on Bartók Béla út in order to establish a joint student revolutionary committee, which was on the 27th of October. This was a very important step because it turned out that MEFES could not play that role. So the active students realized that they needed to have an organization which can speak for all students. A lot of compromises were made. I would say with wisdom. I was only 19, and I was sitting in there. And sometimes we were, well, yeah, let's do it together. The next day, or 2 days later, the head of this, the leadership of this revolutionary committee was received by Imre Nagy. The students had a word and had their voice. Now let's go to the second point, the prestige of these students. I would say almost prominence, almost celebrity. On the 23rd of October in the morning, I was taking the bus, and the conductor was asking for a copy of the 14 points, not for the fare. Give me a copy of the 14 points. Then in the afternoon, the manifestation, 10,000 people from the Technical University, marching from the university to the BEM statue, which is in front of the Foreign Ministry. We were silently marching. That was a decision because people felt that the night before we went so far in our demands that we had to be careful. Therefore, we decided a silent manifestation. And I remember older people from the sidewalk taking their handkerchiefs and waving at the students. Some people had tears in their eyes. Everyone accepted the 14 points, as I mentioned before, which was the national set of national demands in the beginning. Then, of course, later there were all kinds of demands, and different groups came up with different statements. Now, let me say how in our student revolutionary committee at Bartók Béla we experienced the trust of the people, the confidence, which I think turns into a prestige. Once we got a call from Kelenföld railway station, please come and bring away, haul away a wagon full of care packages that just arrived from Austria and distribute it among the population. Well, we had no means of transportation. It was at that point that I went down to Bartók Béla in front of the dormitory, stopped the first truck, and I asked the driver, he had some gray hair already, he said, look, would you want to work for the Student Revolutionary Committee? He said, okay, kids, I'll work for you, but you know, we need gasoline. So I said, don't worry, we'll get the gasoline. In front of that dormitory, to this day, there is a military barracks. Then it was called Zalkamate. I think now it's called Hadik. Little did we know that that was the center of Hungarian military intelligence. But we went and demanded the gasoline, and we got it. The second one that I want to mention is one day we get a call from Maury Zsigmond Körter, please come because they want to lynch a fellow here who happened to be a secret police officer. So we went out, 3 of us. I was the youngest one at 19 and another couple of others older. We went out and basically took this man into our dormitory. We stopped the people. The people did not sort of fight with us. Okay, let them take him. And then we sent him over to the Central Police Station in Budapest. I mean in Pest. One evening we got a call from Sasadi út because of 2 neighbors. One of them was supposedly an AVH officer, and they were fighting each other. We had to go out and try to help them. We went out, the 3 of us, and we said, look, please stop this. Are you an AVH officer? Are you? None of them was. They were 2 bad neighbors, that's all. He said, look, instead of spending time and energy fighting each other, support us. That's your role. And they they heeded the advice. The last one was, a man was lining up in Bartók Béla út in front of the bakery trying to get some bread, and there were some aviation snipers all over the place. And there was one, must have been somewhere up on the top of one of the buildings, and this man got shot in the middle of his head and got into coma. What did the people do in that queue? They didn't call the police. They didn't try to call some hospital or whatever. They came to the dormitory. They said, please help. We took that man in. I remember to this day a hole here, in coma, fast breathing, and blood and leaking out. So by then we had a car, so we took him into Tétényi. But these were some vignettes of actual events I witnessed and lived through. Now the third one, the solidarity among the Hungarian people, and the readiness, the willingness to help. As Budapest became paralyzed and the number of the wounded rose, provision of essential services became very critical. Only solidarity and helping hands could provide the means to assist those who needed needed provisions. We were running out of food at the dormitory, I remember, at Bartók Béla út, when the kitchen personnel took their own initiatives to get the essential ingredients to feed us, mobilizing even help from the countryside through friends and family members, so that the students could stay there and would not starve. The bakery at Bartók Béla út that I mentioned before had to slow down the production of bread because they were running out of flour. They began to ration the bread. People accepted it. And there were no fights. They accepted it. And the managers or whoever run the bakery, they did it in a very responsible way, very open way. Then shipments of bread, flour, vegetables, and potatoes were sent to our dormitory for distribution in the neighborhood. Well, which we did, trying to be as efficient and as equitable as we could. And I remember a young mother with a baby on her arms and a young kid, probably a brother or sister. And as we gave her what she wanted to have, vegetables, bread, this and the other thing, then one of the students took the stuff for her, took home to her house, because she might have had difficulty managing. So it didn't take any time for this decision to be born. You know, it was just natural in that ambiance. As you all know, money was collected in open crates on the sidewalks at more important intersections in the city. And the money was piling up and nobody touched it. Store windows were broken because of the fights. For long days, nobody touched any of the goods, any of the merchandise. Personnel volunteered to work at all hours, taking initiatives of their own to schedule shifts, and establishments providing essential services were working. This was true of bakeries, including one close to us on Bartók Béla út, we remember well. Essential food stores, especially the hospitals, that became very important. I remember the truck drivers, the police, and I have to emphasize that we are talking about the blue uniformed police, which was not the khaki uniform of the Secret Service police. And they all did their best to help the people. So for those familiar with these 1956 stories, because there are many from oral history collections, much of this has become commonplace about the revolution. But I want to caution that they do not cease to be a manifestation of an extraordinary solidarity in Hungarian society. What the well-known historian and classic scholar Károly Kerényi called the moral high voltage of the barricades, which pervaded Hungarian society those days. But naturally, Kerényi added, it could not be sustained by humans for a long time. He knew the human being. He knew all the Greek gods. Personally, I got away from those 2 weeks with an improbable experience. The most influential 2 weeks in many respects of my own life. Strong bonding with strangers I had never seen. Yet, I was certain that we had the same, we had common goals, and we knew that we belonged. This enriching sentiment accompanied me through all my life, first as a refugee, then as a citizen of my adopted country, and after 1990, as a proud traveler with a Hungarian passport. Let me just close with a small vignette of another personal experience. Before I say that, let me explain something to those of you who may not know the background. In Budapest, every apartment building had a janitor, a házmester. This was, frankly, commonly despised, unrespected profession, not without reason. These házmesters, these janitors, in 1944, were great supporters of the arrow-crossed thugs, and in 2-3 years, they were informers of the Communist Party. Well, with the head, after this sort of background, let me just share with you the story. With the head of our Revolutionary Council in Bartók Béla, we were heading to Mária utca, where there was another dorm of the Technical University. We wanted to be in touch and exchange views. And as we crossed the Petőfi Bridge, and then we went through towards Bakács Square, here down on Ráday Street. And as we were passing in front of the church, there was a Soviet tank. A Soviet tank was standing there, and we passed, and all of a sudden, an incredible thunder, and we saw that this tank shot into the church tower. We threw ourselves down on the ground and looked. The tank wasn't moving. We quickly jumped up before it moved and began to run like rabbits to Ráday Street, down south, back to Boráros tér. As we were running on Ráday Street, we were passing by an entrance of an apartment building where there was half a dozen or more people looking for safety behind the gate. And one younger fellow screamed, "Don't shoot, there are people here." So as you see, the black humor of Hungarians had not failed them even during the revolution. And as we get down to Boráros tér, then came something which really affected me. Two of us are walking on the sidewalk, and then a middle-aged man comes out, and he says, "Are you students?" We said, "Yes." He said, "Have you had some food today? Please come in, I'll take you in. Right here behind the entrance, I can take you and give you some food. You see, I am the házmester of this building." I couldn't tell you a more convincing example of solidarity. Thank you.